Live from Utah's Wasatch Front, the pulse of the Mountain West, where the issues that shape your life meet the truth that sets you free. Across Utah, across the Republic, and around the world, welcome. I'm Trent Christensen, and this is KMMU. KMMU and Main Street Media stream live wherever you enjoy your streaming. We broadcast live on YouTube, Rumble, X, and on our website, kmmu.org. Now please join our host, John Twitchell. This is Let's Talk Utah's Talk with John.
Afternoon, folks. This is Talk with John, and as you can see, I'm being joined by Tina Cannon, and I will bring her more live here in just a minute. But first, I want to get this show off to a proper start. You are watching KMMU or listening, whatever the case may be, to KMMU.org. That's Main Street Media, Utah. We are grateful to be here with you today. I am John of Talk with John, and I'm looking forward to being with you for the next 2 hours. Before we get rolling on that, I want to give out the show prayer and the show mantra. Now, folks, show prayer and show mantra has to do with the way I see the world, and it's the prayer of my heart and the mantra of my heart. I don't necessarily live up to it in my daily life, but I attempt to. So I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may be an acceptable token to our Father above. That's the show prayer. Show mantra. Where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. Now, awesome. I have Utah State Auditor Tina Cannon joining me right now. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, John. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so there are two stories that we are going to touch base today on. I want to say, oh man, I wish I could remember off the top of my head when I last had you on. I want to say it was in June, later part of June, past the 15th. I just can't remember exactly how late in June. So if I remember correctly, that's when we last had you on, and that was at my last studio. I now have a new studio. And so I'm glad to have you in here now. We will be going. So at the last interview that I had you said, hey, and I'm going to let you use the proper terms, but you looked into vineyard. And then also last week you did a report, you did a release on manufacturing extension partnership with both. And then I love this. I guarantee you this is rubbing some people wrong. I guarantee you it's rubbing people wrong. You did a report, and I'll tell you the part that I think is rubbing people, that would rub someone wrong. You did the State of Utah Office of the Utah State Auditor did a report on manufacturing extension partnership with both Utah State and the University of Utah. And what I guarantee you is rubbing some people wrong over at the University of Utah. You listed Utah State first and the University of Utah second. I find that comical. I want to know. The inquiring minds want to know why you did the University of Utah or the Utah State before the University of Utah, because Utah was founded first. University of Utah, Utah State. Would Utah State University come for? No, that wouldn't come first. If Utah State University, Utah State University, I don't think would become first in alphabetical order.
No.
So.
No. But they were first in the amount of money they didn't oversee. So in this case, this is just about who the bad guys were in order. So Utah State got top billing on this one.
Okay.
And that's difficult for me to say it that way because that's my alma mater. So I would much rather it have been the U. But in this case, it was Utah State had oversight over this money and failed to provide that oversight. So, which is why there was up to $3 million, $2.8 million that was misused.
$2.8 million used,
Misused.
possibly misused by a university. How
No,
How
it was actually by Impact Utah, but Utah State distributed the funds last. So it actually it was a direct appropriation from the legislature to what is called the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which was Utah State, University of Utah, and then Impact Utah. And it was at Impact Utah and the president of Impact Utah who was able to take that money and not use it to expand manufacturing within the state of Utah. He did extensive traveling. He went to Hawaii, Florida multiple times, Las Vegas, did a lot of excursions on those trips, used the company credit card for haircuts, massages, exercise equipment. And then he bought another company. So he had a good time with Manufacturing Extension Partnership money. So
I need to figure that out. I need to figure that out. Would you please help me to figure out how to do that, Tina?
No, actually, I would tell you don't do that, because in this case, this is a federal grant where the state of Utah matches federal funding, and they match it 3-1. But because it was misused like that, the federal government has already contacted my office, and they will probably be stepping in and requesting their grant money back as well. So there were a lot of ripples that came out of this and continue to come out of this investigation.
Okay. You're jumping the gun. I wanted to get to Vineyard first.
Okay, sorry.
You're jumping the gun on me, Tina. Just because you're the state auditor and you're older and wiser and everything better than me doesn't mean you get to drive the bus. Or I'm going to pout. I'm pouting right now. I'm pouting. Okay.
We'll back up. We'll do Vineyard.
Let's just go to Vineyard. So
okay.
Vineyard, now you sent me a little screenshot of for all funds for Vineyard and then for RDA funds only. So Dwayne, my awesome producer, can you please put this up and let's have you explain this to me? And I'm like, I've got to figure out a way, Tina, to get just a portion of this, a small portion of these funds, and I won't have to work again.
But then I spent a lot of time in your life looking deeply into your finances. So what you're seeing on your screen is every entity in the state of Utah, every government entity is required to report to Transparent Utah what their transactions were, every financial transaction. And what you're seeing is the correction that Vineyard had to make in the amount of reporting it did to Transparent Utah.
Okay. I want to point something out, something that I said to you. So there's old total, new total, and difference. Yeah. I'm like, this kind of looks like the jobs report for the federal government.
Yep. That's what you
I mean, that was the first thing that went through my head.
Yep. And I think that person got fired. So, that's the extent of what I should say about that. But yeah, when you see these kind of mistakes, part of the pushback Vineyard gave us when we went in and did this review is, well, everybody's making this mistake. It's not just us. Everybody's doing it this way. And that's been our message out. And one of the reasons why we keep talking about it is we want to make sure that every government entity is accurately reporting their numbers to Transparent Utah. This is public money, and they are required to report to the taxpayer where this money is being spent and how it's being spent. So these were the corrections that they were required to make. So total you have to remember in Vineyard that the city council and the redevelopment agency board are the same as the city council and the mayor. So when we broke it out between the city funds and the RDA funds, these are very intermingled funds because they're city finances, and the RDA boundaries are the same as the full city. So there's a lot of
what are RDA funds? Let's
So this is a redevelopment agency. So within a government entity, they could designate an area of the boundaries to be a redevelopment area. So these are this funding, the RDA funds, are typically what is set aside for the county and the school districts. But by definition, the largest property taxing entity within a governmental boundary is always the schools. They collect the most in property tax. So when you're talking about RDAs, this is money that's moved away from education and county services and sent towards economic development activities by the controlling entity. So this is money that typically would go to the schools or Alpine School District in this case, and it is being used by the city of Vineyard for other purposes. And in this case, they are supposed to be increasing the economic development of Vineyard so that over time it creates a larger and a more valuable property tax revenue for the school district. That's why the school district agrees to give it up. But in this case, it had already matured. It's matured past its original 20 years. And the RDA board, which consists of the city council, went ahead and approved it for an additional 20 years without meeting with the school districts and the county officials to approve that extension. This is the only RDA within the state of Utah that is allowed to do that. It was a legislative carve out by Kurt Bramble when he was in the Senate. He's no longer in the Senate, that allowed Vineyard to have that autonomy and the ability to do that. That's created a little bit of a problem for Vineyard because it's the only one. It felt like it didn't need to go back and even publish for the public what they've been doing with the money instead. And that was why we did the report. Is you have to report back to the public what you're doing. So you need to have public meetings for the RDA and explain what you're doing. And you also have to report to Transparent Utah the amount of money that you're spending and who you're giving it to. And in this case, a lot of these payments went to developers. So
Okay. So I see for all funds and then for RDA only. What is the numbers that we really need to focus on?
So I think the year 2022 is probably the highlight through this, because any time that you are seeing a $10 million correction in the amount of money distributed out in one year.
A number that I'm seeing is that number is more than double if you go for the RDA funds only.
Yeah.
In 2022, that number's double the highest of any other number, and often it's more than 4 times the number of any other year.
Yeah, it's really hard to think that was an oversight when you look at that amount of money. And they're arguing back that, well, their year-end adjustments. Well, all of your payments to a developer should not be in your year-end adjustments. So we expect to see these reported timely and on the website. And then part of the pushback, the biggest problems that were happening in Vineyard is just the lack of allowing the public to know what was going on. And it is a good reminder to every government official across the state that this is taxpayer money. It's not the city's money. This is taxpayers' money that they have involuntarily had to turn over to the city and to the school districts. So reporting back to them what you did with their money is your responsibility as an elected official. So
yeah, if they withhold that money, somebody could come and collect it by the point of a gun.
Yeah, that's the point is, or you can have your property foreclosed on if you don't pay your property tax.
Right.
So
and if you stay in the home and you don't leave, you will be removed at the point of a gun.
Exactly. So there are consequences. This isn't voluntary. So it is public money. And that's the biggest part about being in a republic is this is not the most effective or efficient way to run a government, but this is it's supposed to be the most transparent way to run a government, that we are doing everything we do is on behalf of our fellow citizens. And so we are making sure that our fellow citizens are fully aware of what we're doing, why we're doing it. And that's why we had encouraged that they have their annual meetings for the redevelopment agency and that they report back to the public what the plan is, how the investment of this money is being used, and how it will benefit the school districts in the long term. So that is basically what we found. We did get a lot of pushback from the entity originally, which is unfortunate. There were members of the city council who were more than cooperative and willing to give us anything that we needed, but not all. So it was a good reminder.
So for those of you that are not familiar with Utah County very much, or not familiar with the state of Utah, Vineyard is and I'm pulling it up, a city in Utah. So I'm going to Google to find out exactly.
It's the Geneva Still site. It's the old Geneva Still site.
Right. It's the old Geneva Still site. And so Vineyard is a city in Utah County. It is part of the Provo-Orem metropolitan area. At 20, it's the fastest growing population. It grew from 139 at 2010 census to 12,543 at the 2020 census, making it the fastest growing city in Utah and one of the fastest growing cities in the nation during that time. It was incorporated in May of 1989. So after the steel company had shut down. So
there was a lot of reclamation that needed to be done in cleaning up of the industrial site. And that's the original purpose of this 20-year redevelopment agency, was making that into a livable area. So there were some great uses for it. It's up to the citizens in Vineyard to decide whether the extension of another 20 years was appropriate, or whether or not the commercial areas have developed to the point that they are now self-sustaining and do not need the additional investment. That there's been a lot of complaints from the public over trips to Europe and memberships in the Economic Development Corporation of Utah and things that were paid for by the city with this money. That is up to the residents in Vineyard to decide whether or not it was appropriately used. But in order to decide if it was appropriately used, you have to know how it was used. And that's what Transparent Utah was for and is to tell people where the money actually went, so that they can make an educated decision over whether or not that was a smart use. Also, the thing to point out here, John, is that the Alpine School District is dividing into 3 at this point. And there was a major discussion in the division lines for the Alpine School District who would have Vineyard, because so much of this money for that 12,000 residents is not going to schools. It is going to commercial property development within the city and not going to educating children. And that is a drain off of the full Alpine School District, is funding the education within that area instead of the revenue from the RDA. So when you're talking 25 million a year, that is a substantial amount of money that goes into education. The explanation for how it's being used and how that is actually benefiting the community is a relevant discussion for citizens, not only in Vineyard, but in Utah County in general, over whether or not that's fair to the rest of the school district, that money is being used differently, and then to the school children who it's not being used for.
So as we look at the years, in 2018, it was over $1 million short. In 2019, it says negative 166. Does that mean they overpaid?
That means that they've corrected it, and sometimes what this will be is they've reported in one year what should have been in the other, and they haven't. So there's an adjustment back and forth. These are usually closing adjustments where they're making big adjustments, but I never expect to see a $10 million adjustment. These are large adjustments that had to be made. You'll see in the overall, sometimes the RDA is paying for something that the city should have been paying for. So you'll see there's always the positive adjustment to the reporting on the city as a whole, and a negative in the RDA, which means that they are shifting back and forth between the two entities. And that becomes very difficult in the financial management when the RDA boundaries are the exact same as the city boundaries, and the boards are exactly the same. they tend to commingle those funds instead of separating this is an RDA, this is the city, and keeping a very clear distinction between the expenses and the revenues of both.
So, what was your finding from this?
Yeah, we found that they were not, the complaint that we got was that they were not accurately reporting to Transparent Utah. And we found that to be true, as these numbers illustrate that nope, they were not reporting what they should have been reporting to Transparent Utah. The other complaint was that they were not accurately reporting in their financial statements the obligations of the RDA. That is also true, that they are not accurately reporting what was going on within the RDA in the financial statements. And the third thing was that based on the dissolution of the Alpine School District, the future of this RDA is uncertain. And the legal question over whether or not the city officials can make a decision for a school district that does not yet exist is still a legal question that needs to be answered. And we had cautioned the city that to go forward without at least acknowledging the question over whether or not you can legally use the funding of a school district that has not even been established yet is a question that's out there. Like I mentioned before, this is the only RDA within the state that was allowed to do this without the input. Typically, the school district representatives have to come in and vote yes in order to let the funding go somewhere else. Typically in RDAs, when you've got a county and a city, you can outvote the school district representation on the RDA board. And so the school districts hesitate to be involved in these at all because they feel like their votes don't matter anyway, and they get outvoted and the money gets used anyway. But to not even include them in the conversation where they knew what was happening is really inappropriate, especially in this situation where they were able to do something different than any other RDA.
So what do you do with this information? Because as I understand correctly, if I understand correctly, let me correct myself. You do not have any authority of enforcement or an enforcement arm. So like if the governor was to say, have done this report and found this report, well, then he can use his executive authority to get in touch with the AG and see if he would look into it. And even if that doesn't happen, he can take the state highway patrol or something along those lines and at least start doing some investigations on his end. What's the next step now that we know this?
So we have to publicly we'll go back in and audit again and make sure that they're accurately reporting. And then if we find they are not, we do have the ability to withhold distribution of funding. Like, for example, when we found a mistake in Grand County, we held their TRT funds last year for about 9 months. We held the distribution.
And TRT funds are
transient room tax. So we can hold distribution of state funding to an entity that is non-compliant. So we try not to do that because it makes it very hard for them to meet their payroll when we do that. But we do have that portion of it. But that's the independence of the state auditor's office, is that we represent the taxpayer. So our biggest tool in this process is making the residents of Vineyard aware that, okay, everything's out there now. We recommend that you go look at it, and that you've got a municipal election coming up this fall. I would be asking all the candidates how they feel about reporting to Transparent Utah, and especially your mayor candidates, how they feel about economic development and the expenditures being made for economic development, whether or not you feel like that's appropriate for your city. We've outlined it for you. So we've made it easy. You can go to auditor.utah.gov, and you can search the reports and find this one pretty easily, and then hold your own elected officials accountable for the decisions that they make.
Okay, so let me ask you this. This is a question that comes to my mind. So there is a real estate developer that's involved in this process.
Yes.
Do you think that have they done anything inappropriate, or is this pretty much in the city's hands, at least as far as the proper reporting not happening, is that completely on the city versus the developer holds some accountability on this?
This is 100% on the city, that the city has to tell you what they did with it. And there may be some reluctance of the developer for people to know that they got the money, but the control over whether or not people know that is 100% the city. So, yeah, this was a city mistake.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that clarification. So we've got the last roughly half hour to go dig into a little bit bigger situation that happened with the state of Utah. So I want to read the headline, the headline of this report. The state of Utah Office of the Utah State Auditor, Tina M. Cannon, Utah State Auditor, Manufacturing Extension Partnership Limited Review for the period of January 1st, 2023 through December 31st of 2024. So 2-year review. And I'm just going to read kind of roughly the first paragraph. It gives to whom and what for and whom so. And I've already mentioned the presidents of Utah State University and the president of University of Utah are listed. But the office of this, I want to give the 4 allegations that were mentioned. The office of the state Utah Auditor offers a hotline program through which we receive complaints with financial or compliance implications related to the state or local governments. OSA, that's Office of the Utah State Auditor, received a complaint alleging misuse of public funds by Impact Utah, IU, a nonprofit entity receiving state and federal grant revenue. To determine the credibility of these allegations, we performed the following procedures. Assess the nature of the federal grant requirements by reviewing federal publications. That's 1. Then 2, assessed oversight activities performed by various state entities involved through interviews with state personnel. Point 3, reviewed certain IU financial and operational activity. Specifically, we reviewed a judgmental sample of IU's cash transfers, credit card transactions, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and other financial information for calendar year 2023-2024, unless otherwise noted. And point number 4, interviewed current and former IU employees to gain an understanding of IU operations. As described in the findings, then this is kind of a paragraph after that. So out of those points, as described in the findings, we believe that a lack of clear delineation of responsibilities and procedures over the state granted funds led to insufficient oversight of these funds and resulted in IU misusing state funds without detection for several years. So with both this situation and with Vineyard, you had someone report that this was the case. It's not something you went out and found. It was a tip line, apparently, that you guys have set up. And so people went out and looked into it. Now, before we get into this a little bit further, I do want to mention, folks, you are listening to Tina Cannon, the state auditor of Utah, on Talk with John here on KMMU.org. Now, you can go to KMMU.org. You can go to our Twitter or X handle. You can go to YouTube, our YouTube page or a Rumble page to be able to watch this show, to rewatch it, to share with your friends, family, and look into things so you can find out how to get a hold of Tina and if you think something's not happening properly. And so you can share that information with others. So we appreciate you being here with us, Tina. So this report just barely came out. And I'm going to have on screen, I'm going to have Dwayne put it on screen so people can see at least the front page of it. So here is my question. So here's it came from, not my question, statement. Both of these were reported by at least one individual.
Yeah.
Did they happen to work for the state or the city that reported it, or was it some other individual that found it?
So in MEP, this one was an anonymous tip through the tip line. They were very frustrated by the time it got to us. It had been going on for a while. So they were very anxious for us to come in. So they had reported it to the Attorney General, to the Office of the Legislative Auditors, to the federal government. So there's a long list of people that they reported it to. Of those entities, we were the quickest, which doesn't say we're the fastest, but and we are, of the local entities, we are the ones who are most equipped to be able to go in and do a financial review of this nature. So a lot of this is a financial review, and also so understanding the transactions in their financial statements inside their checkbooks, for lack of a better word. We reviewed all of their QuickBooks and their financial transactions between entities, because if you go through it, you can see that he was able to buy a completely separate company with the proceeds from this audit. So we see a lot of money that is transferred out of IU to purchase another company. So then we're looking and talking to employees of both companies over what was going on both sides of those transactions. So this is an in-depth financial review, but I want to go back to when it comes in through the hotline. We keep who reports it completely anonymous, and we protect their identity because of, as you can see in the nature of this, these are some serious allegations. And in the case of employees who may or may not still be there, we want to make sure that their jobs are protected if at all possible. IU is not surviving, as we've kind of put it. They're probably not long for this world based on the type of problems that we've identified. But there was good work being done by employees within the company and mismanagement happening by the president. So we want to make sure that when something like this happens, the reason why the findings are a lack of oversight is trying to get the money back after something like this has happened is going to be very difficult, if not impossible. So we want to make all of the other state entities across the state, all of the governmental entities that are doing grants, need to know that they are responsible for proper oversight over how that money is used, because once it's used inappropriately, it's very difficult to get it back. So that is the lesson learned, is these types of things happened and were able to happen over multiple years because the entities who were giving the money out were not following through and following up with the entity to ask, how is it being used? And then making that assessment over, is it being used appropriately? Buying another company that has nothing to do with manufacturing within the state of Utah is a hard sell on manufacturing extension grants. And that's not furthering manufacturing within the state of Utah. One of the reasons you said this report just came out, remember that we give those entities, so Utah State, Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, the legislature, and Utah State University all received 3 weeks at a minimum to respond back to the state auditor's office on what we'd found and to give us any feedback over, did we get it quite right? Or is there something did we not get it quite right? Is there something you need us to change in this, so that we are fair to them as well? But we were anxious to get this out to those entities by July 1, because there was another $2.8 million scheduled to be dispersed to Impact Utah July 1. Wow. We needed to make sure that they were aware that these problems were going on, and that we would highly recommend that they not distribute that money. Where this started is a direct appropriation grant from the legislature saying, you will give $2.8 million a year to the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Group, which consisted of Impact Utah, Utah State, and University of Utah. The one person or the one entity of those three that was actually doing the work is Impact Utah. So they were receiving that amount of money for multiple years in a row.
Okay.
So
I want to get into a couple of things with that, with Impact Utah. But first, okay, would this be a fair assessment of this report? A little bit further fair assessment. Your investigation revealed questionable tactics or transactions, including large funds transferred between the nonprofit Impact Utah and a for-profit entity, Vario Impact, controlled by the same individual between 2022 and 2024, and as much as 2.8 million in grant dollars appeared to have been diverted for private benefit rather than serving the intended economic deployment mission. Then kind of an additional point to that, the report highlights systemic shortcomings, inadequate oversight mechanisms, failure to recognize related party transactions, and a weak financial controls over grants administered. Now, pretty much you've said that. So here's my question. Two questions that I have. What was IU supposed to do? And then what is this Vario Impact company? What type of companies are they? And why was this money given to IU to begin with? What were they going to do with it other than
so
just
they were
manufacturing?
So we've actually had customers of IU who've reached out since. I got a text last Friday night, actually, at 10 o'clock at night, when someone saw the news story and reached out. So they were providing training for business owners and anyone involved in the manufacturing process across the state of Utah. So numerous amount of companies, and they were training them on leveling up, on improving outputs in advertising and anything related to furthering manufacturing. So the whole idea of this federal grant was that we are going to bring manufacturing back to the United States, and we're going to start offering certifications to your employees, and so that anyone who brings you their business, let's think machine shops or someone else who contacted me over this, those certifications for those employees were offered through Impact U. And a lot of the feedback from those companies who were actually those were the employees within the company who were doing that work through small business. I can't think of the word. The small business
Administration.
Not the administration, because that goes more federal, but within counties, they have, and the universities have set up business support units where you can go, where a business owner can go in and ask for additional training, and the grants are given to provide that training for manufacturing jobs and manufacturing companies within the state. So the idea being that if you gave support to those companies, they would be able to expand and grow their businesses within Utah, and we would grow the manufacturing base. That's not part of that was happening, and we see, if you look at the amount of money dispersed to Impact Utah over time, there comes a point in time in the early 2000s where the amount of money that is being dispersed increases drastically. And it is at that point in time where you start seeing the program revenue and the amount of grant revenue that's increasing. It's not being used for that purpose anymore because they were being given more than they needed to actually run that program. It created excess money within the company, which just was a temptation, apparently, that someone was not able to resist. And that is the point with this. Was a not-for-profit company that was not compliant with IRS regulations over having a board determining the compensation that is given to the president. So based on comparable companies, he was paying himself twice the amount of money for the similar position in a similarly sized company. And then he was also giving himself a bonus every year. So he was paying himself roughly $540,000 a year on average during this time period for compensation, which is above what we would expect to see in companies of this size. So because he doesn't have an operating board of directors, anyone else to oversee how that money is being used, he is able to then make those decisions, exercise undue influence over the accountants in the company, and there's no one else to go to complain other than the oversight entities. And they weren't getting any response back from the U, from Utah State, from GOEO. So then they turned to the state auditor, and why you start seeing the hotline, which is why the hotline exists. Is when things like this happen, you need to have someone who provides that oversight to go back in and do the investigation.
So I wonder if this individual was giving money to University of Utah, to Utah State, given grant.
Part of what we found were political donations, and I do believe that one particular candidate who knows that they got the money has committed to pay the money back. We have had, our office was contacted by someone who got a grant from Impact Utah that they know they got inappropriately, and they contacted our office for information on how to refund that money back. So good people are still out there, and they are willing to return the money that they got inappropriately. But the fact that the lesson to be learned is for the other 1,800 government entities across the state of Utah. If you are giving out grant money, we're warning you, these kind of things happen when you don't provide proper oversight. And if I have to be the final oversight for 1,800 entities, I'm going to need more employees, because I can't stop all of this from happening up front. That is the job of the government entity who's giving out the money.
So here's a question. Why was there a mislap over this grant oversight?
That's a great question. So part of the original pushback that we've got and the discussions we've been having with the legislature are, when they do a direct appropriation grant like this, their argument, the other entities, GOEO and U of U and Utah State, argue that when the legislature says you must give $2.8 million to this particular company, they don't feel like they have the power to go in and evaluate whether or not that's appropriate, because the law is written, you give the money this way. So shout out to Val Peterson, who wrote legislation in fiscal 2024, or in the legislative session of 2024, to make sure that these entities knew that they were responsible for the oversight, even though it is direct appropriation. So that comes into play in the last 6 months of the review period that we have, that they are subject to clawback of the funds that were given back or given out. And part of our recommendation was that they explore that. This particular company we have referred this to the Attorney General's office for legal repercussions for whether or not the next steps, because we just report what we found. We turn over all of our working papers over to the Attorney General, and they are able to determine whether or not legal ramifications are here or what legal steps are next. All of that will depend on the assets still held within the companies, whether or not they're able to recover this money. But anytime that you see, like you mentioned with Vario being purchased, anytime it goes to that other entity, it's subject to whether or not there is enough commingling of funds that the entities are no longer considered legally separate, and that the obligations of Impact Utah would then flow to go to Vario, and they were able to recoup the funds that went into Vario. So that is a legal determination that is now in the hands of the Attorney General. So like I said, that gets really, really complicated in how you get it back. So our warning is, we would prefer you did oversight in the first place to stop this from happening.
The bottom line is there's some money that's just not going to be able to get received back. I would assume that a very significant portion of that money is not going to be able to be gotten back. Okay, so our listeners are curious. It's a large report, 18 pages. How long and how much resources does an assessment like that take?
So we got this report in mid-January and released it by July 1. And there's a lot of work that went on in between, but that was primarily the work of two 2 people full-time over that time period.
Okay, so when did it
So
come in again? Say when it came.
mid-January. We got it in
Mid-January.
mid-January. We didn't
So
start working on it in mid-January, but we received the complaint mid-January. We did get a call from the federal government. They saw the news stories and they were scheduled. They were surprised how fast we got in and got out. So we're good. But
so what you're saying is you're not revealing all of your secret sauce then, Tina.
so what I'm saying is I currently have 124 complaints under our hotline. I have more work than I can possibly get to. And it is sometimes, like now, it is a difficult decision to decide where we're going to focus our taxpayer resources in order to look, because we get more complaints than we can handle. I wish that were not true, but as long as and why we would prefer that oversight happen in the entities who are giving out the money. But we were kind of shocked by some of the responses over whistleblowers are still the most effective way when waste, fraud, and abuse happen and if that is where the government wants the oversight to be, then I'm going to need a bigger staff and a lot bigger staff. Because we do risk assessments in the state auditor's office. We can tell you the kind of controls that should be in place. We would strongly encourage the entities to put those in place over all of their money so that you're not losing taxpayer money. That's the way it's supposed to work in a well-run system. So we would prefer to see that instead of making it available, because even we've got another report that will be coming out over a local government who we've contacted their internal auditor, told them they had a problem. They didn't think they had a problem. We reiterated, you've got a problem. And then we showed them. And sure enough, they had a problem. And so it's unfortunate. There are reasons why we publicize the work that we do. We want government entities to learn the lesson that the others learned the hard way.
Can learn from.
We want this message out there and we're happy to provide you guidance on how to set up a system with proper oversights in place. But this is someone else's money. This is taxpayer money. It should have strenuous controls, and then we recommended to the legislature not to fund these things up front, that you do these types of grants on a reimbursement basis. They have not liked that idea, but a reimbursement is much easier to track than fronting the funds up front. But if you're going to fund funds up front, you need a strong contract and an understanding with the entity that you will go in and check. Not-for-profits don't like that oversight. And that's the initial response from one of the agencies was, well, if we tell them that the state auditor will require them to submit budgets and financial statements, they won't take the money. And my response was, oops, don't give it to them then. It's not hard. So if you don't, and that's my warning out to not-for-profits who would take government funding. If you don't want my oversight, don't take the money. Because once you take taxpayer money, you are subject to my oversight and you are subject to our review of how you use the money. And I do believe you are subject to reporting what your salaries are. That's where government money is. Every employee who works for a government entity across the state has their salaries reported on Transparent Utah. A not-for-profit that is fully funded with taxpayer money should be subject to the same rule. That's my personal opinion, and I'm not in the legislature, but I'm going to sure work to make sure that happens, because it's disturbing to me that you can pay over twice what the market is paying because you're a not-for-profit, even though you are 100% funded with government money.
Okay. What would you estimate the total amount of the funds that were misused? What of the, was it 2.8 million? What percentage of those funds would you say was misused? Is it like 500?
That was our finding, was that the 2.8 to over that 2-year period. The question I get more often is that everything? No, it was a limited time period because these types of things take a lot of resources to go through every financial transaction like this and to interview the employees. So was there something before 2023? Probably. Was there something after 2024? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But we had to limit it, the scope, so that we could get in and be done quickly, so that we could get the warning out. Please don't give them any more money. Things are not going well.
So how much total money did they receive during that 2-year period, and how much do you believe was misused?
So I think it's on page 5 of your report in the footnotes, you can see that there's about $1 million coming in from the federal government. There's 2.8 million coming in annually from the state of Utah. And then they have program revenue of right around 900,000 to 1.1 million, somewhere in there. That's their total. So about 50% based on those 25 to 50%, depending. And we're not saying
I'm in the wrong situation here.
So anytime you're going to argue that theft pays, I'm going to have to disagree with you, John. No, this company is now going the way of all bad companies. It's not going to exist. So we would strongly recommend
the bottom of page 5.
So that goes back to how you introduced the show. So the reason the founding fathers felt like a republic would only work for a moral people is because you had to believe, go back to that founding religion. There is a life after this one, and you will answer for your actions in this life and the next one. And that was called the American religion. And we could all unify over, regardless of who you pray to, you believe you will pay for your actions in this life and the next one. So I don't recommend theft. It is not.
Who needs Jimmy Cricket when you've got Tina Cannon on your shoulder to,
Well, it's just my pet peeve. I see this. We joke all the time that we destroy our faith in our fellow men one day at a time in the state auditor's office. So,
well,
sometimes it's good to remember there are good people out there, and if not, then I'm going to force you into it, because it is the unfortunate thing that as these types of things happen, the amount of oversight and control that has to go into government increases, and that increases the cost of government. So that's why it is not lost on me that the amount of money that they misused is below the amount of money that I had asked for in my budget increase last year. And we were not given our budget increase. So.
Okay. So follow-up question. How many state employees were aware of this organization, and were any of them aware that these transactions were happening?
We do believe that by the end, the whistleblowers had let multiple agencies know. So that's a hard question to answer over how many knew and when they knew it. Had they been doing proper oversight over it, more people would have known, and hopefully they would have stopped it. I'm assuming once they knew, they would have stopped it. But the whistleblowers had contacted multiple people at all 3 entities that we name in the report. So GOEO, Utah State, and University of Utah were all made aware.
Okay, we've got roughly 3 minutes left or so.
Wow, that was a fast hour.
Maybe 4. Kind of depends on how long it takes Michael Letts to join us. What are the takeaways? Well, first of all, let's give out how people can contact you. You've kind of said that. Let's be very clear. Folks, if you're aware, if you believe that somebody is mishandling money, I don't know, to build a fence around their house with public money, I'm not saying who that might be, but it happens to be a really big fence around a very big area. I'm not saying who,
So don't report that one to me, because just legal and ethical are 2 totally different things. Let's just clarify that. And now.
Okay. All right.
That one may be legal, and you can
And I
decide
will
whether
wait for Tina Cannon. I will wait for Tina Cannon to get off line before I say the name, but it does start with a C, and it happens to be a major official in the state of Utah. I don't want to cause problems. But
Yeah.
So would you please share with our audience how people can get in touch with you and this tip line that they can reach out to?
So if you go out to About Us, and you can go to the hotline. There's any, or you can do hotline.utah.gov, and it will take you to the state auditor hotline. And anytime you have a concern, you're able to report it through there. You're able to stay completely anonymous in the reporting. The more information you give us, the better, the more likely we are to pick it up. Just because it helps us understand exactly what we're looking at and what the depth and breadth of the work that we would need to do in order to evaluate the concern. So, like I said, we have a lot of reports out there.
Is there any benefit to being someone who tips off the state other than just generally knowing that you're keeping
that you're a good person? We don't do a financial reward. The way the IRS does a reward system that we don't. The state auditor does not do that. It is typically, these are concerned citizens who see the taxpayer money being used inappropriately.
Then they're doing it for a genuinely good reason. That's good to hear. I like that. I actually like the fact that nobody gets a payoff for reporting it. I like that fact, because I've always wondered, well, if there's a payoff involved for you reporting something, how long have you known that this is going on just so you can get a payoff? I mean, that would never happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you want people to take away from this, Tina?
So I would like all of the government entities to exercise proper oversight. And if they don't know what that is, to contact us, and we will help you learn what proper oversights are and how to do a fraud and risk assessment on your own entity, so that you can decide what your risk areas are and how to implement proper controls and oversights into your own entity. But anytime you're doing a grant funding like this one was, we would strongly recommend that there is review of the contract to make sure that that the entity is aware of the oversight responsibilities of reporting back to the state auditor. Had that happened in this particular case, they would have it would have been a requirement for them to have audited financial statements, and we would have caught this long before, and it would have stopped this from happening. So people should know, if they're receiving over $25,000 of federal, state, or local government money, they are subject to the oversight of the state auditor, and they are subject to reporting to our office.
How much money again?
$25,000.
So I just need to find something that I can get for $24,900.
I don't think so.
And 99 cents.
Even then, you still have oversight responsibilities, but you do have to send us your budgets and your financial statements if you get over 25. So, and that puts you on our radar, and we start watching.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. Anybody that looks into me will find out. You can look all you want, but there's nothing to find. So,
yeah.
well,
that's the best way to be, John.
Yeah. I like to joke about this, but I've given way too much of my life when it comes to the government and trying to do stuff like this for free. So,
I appreciate the attention to it, and you're educating your listeners on what had happened here. And if they have any concerns or want to report, please contact our office anytime, and then support our budget requests so we can actually get up to speed and get all of these taken care of in the office.
I want to read this from my producer. The opinions expressed are those of the host, and do not necessarily reflect that the opinions of the guest or of KMMU.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We recommend honesty in your dealings with your fellow men. It's highly recommended.
Yeah, I would concur. So I can have a good time with this, and I'm gonna go, well, boy, geez. Yeah, people want to know why their taxes are so high and why they can't trust people in government. As you pointed
Well,
out,
in this case, yeah, and the not-for-profits. Not-for-profit doesn't mean no one profits. So it's those salaries in the not-for-profits that we're seeing such a huge inflation of the amount of money that is being spent.
okay. Well, Tina, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here.
Anytime, John. It was
God
fun.
bless. Take care, and we'll be in touch in the next quarter or so.
All right. Thanks, John.
Take care, my friend. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
All right, folks. That was Tina Cannon, the state auditor for the state of Utah. I want to say thank you for her joining us. And the person that I was referring to was Spencer Cox, who had a bunch of money that allowed him to build a very, very big fence around his property. Not like, yeah, I won't get into it. We'll just, yeah, as she said, not necessarily illegal, maybe not ethical, but not legal. All right. Now, let me first kind of just pause for a moment. I'm going to quickly give out the top of the hour show prayer and show mantra. Hey, folks, you're watching and mention KMMU. You're watching KMMU Main Street Media Utah. It is we're trying to be the group that is bringing you information that's important for you to know that no one else wants to bring to you. We're part of that process. Definitely not KSL, KUTV, all those guys. They're not interested in bringing this to you. And I am giving Utah a voice. So bottom line is, feel free to be the best part of this group, KMMU Main Street Media Utah, by interacting with us. And you have that opportunity. So that being said, go to our X account, go to YouTube or Rumble, and you can share these videos. You can share that first hour of this show with friends and family, so you can know and let them know what's going on in their state. All right, now we're going to take a national perspective. I'm going to be introducing here in just a moment, but first I want to say this. I want to give out the show prayer and the show mantra. Like I said, folks, from the bottom of my heart, this is where the best part of John comes from, and what's the best part of John is thinking. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. That's the show prayer. The show mantra is, where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. All right, let's bring on my good friend, Michael Letts of Invest USA. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. Michael is with Invest USA. He's given out, I believe it's, if I remember correctly, 17,000 bulletproof and active shooter vests to law enforcement, first responders, and so forth. And he's got a nonprofit. That's what he does. So, I mean, that's a lot of vests given out. And folks, please go to investusa.org. See what you can do to pledge a little bit of money, and let people know about the good work that he's doing. So, Invest USA. I want to say thank you to Michael Letts, my good friend. Thank you for joining me today. Again, we have the state auditor. So normally on the first day of the month, or first Tuesday of the month, you have the full 2 hours. We did 2 hours last week. So forgive me for doing an hour with you this evening.
Oh, it's fine, John. It all works out great, and we're honored to be a guest with you, a good friend and a great host, and we thank you for the opportunity.
Well, it is definitely my privilege and my pleasure. Okay, so something that I said we want to do, folks. Michael Letts happens to be a pastor, or not a pastor, a minister. So and maybe he's a pastor. I don't know. Forgive me, folks. But and I do know he is a chaplain. So what what I've said going forward is every week, if you'd start us out with a word of prayer, that'd be great. Folks, if you missed the end of the show last week, you missed something special. He gave an incredible prayer, and I do want to bring up. I want to mention it to him and the audience on the record. But first, if you'll lead us off with a word of prayer, my friend.
Thank you, John. Our Father, we thank you for this wonderful opportunity to share your truth. All truth is derived from you, and we thank you for the opportunity that truth translates into policy and into the future security of our country. Everything that we say and do on this show honor and glorify you. In Christ's sake, amen.
Amen. And may I be a part of honoring him. Okay, so thank you for joining me. Now, folks, last week, right at the very end, I mentioned that I had a friend who lost his grandson, and someone that's been a friend of my family for, I don't know, well over 40 years. Maybe not well over, right around 40 years. I've known him. He's been a listener to K Talk. He has been part of this show and been part of RBN, which I had a show on before, and is a big fan of Michael Letts. And I told Michael Letts at the very end of the show that he had lost a son, and Michael said, "Well, do you mind if I pray for him?" And so right after the show last week, I closed down, sat down at the dinner table real quickly, slammed something down, and took off for over an hour drive, so I could go be there for kind of a remembrance for their son. And then after that, after the clergy said their piece, and everybody stood up and started talking, I went up to him and I shared with what you did, and he goes, he was blown away. He was like, wow. He goes, that was for me. And I said, that absolutely was for you, my friend. And I called Michael Letts and told him a little bit more of the backstory. But folks, it matters. We need to be there for one another, and we need to form community, being part of community. So I'm going to say that that's an important thing. And Michael, thank you so much to you for being willing to share that with me and share that with our audience, and speaking to the individual himself. So and our producer said amen as well. So the bottom line is, thank you, my friend. Thank you.
It was an honor to be able to do so, and I think that's how everybody in America feels. It's time we be there for our brothers, and there's nothing more important.
Yes, absolutely. So let me share it with you. I'm going to go over the audience with a number of the topics that I have in mind. I think we'll start. The very first thing that we'll start with is not something that I normally talk to Michael a lot about, is international affairs, but Michael keeps track of these things and has shared with some things with me from time to time that I'm like, I didn't know you did that. Or I didn't know you were part of that. And some things I can say and some things I can't. Yeah. So I want to know what your thoughts are on the Trump saying that he has subs off of Russia, and this whole interaction between Putin and Donald Trump. And I'm going to say I've got someone that I have been talking to for years that's another show host. We bounce things off one another, and he is fed up with Trump, especially over this. And one of the main things is over Russia. He's like, we need to get out of it. Why is he ramping things up? And being a salesman who speaks with business owners on a regular basis, and I deal with the little guy all the way up to the people that are over thousands. And I even think I've sat down at the desk of a few CEOs that are over 10,000 people. And I'm like, Donald Trump is handling one thing that I think even some people who were for Donald Trump don't understand is Donald Trump was in the world of two things. He was in the world of business and getting it done, and then he was also in a type of business that you need to be all about self-promotion. And he was in that from his, I think from his teens, definitely in his 20s, all the way till the time he became president. So 50, roughly, let's just call it 50 years. That's part of who you are. And that's why he
Correct.
got into office, is because he was about self-promotion. I'm not going to say that the man isn't a narcissist on some level, but he's not the worst narcissist that we have. And this is something that I would say to some of my friends out there that are really against Trump or really upset with Trump, and especially for his narcissist ways. The bottom line is that's how he got elected to office and how we got to know about him and why we and it's sometimes it cuts negatively, sometimes it cuts positively. But the bottom line is that man says what's coming out of his mouth. We get upset with that. Someone like Barack Obama and Joe Biden, they have spent their whole lives learning how to double speak and how to be subversive without coming and saying things the way they really are. So I get it. You hate it. But there's a part of me that says you've got to understand it and respect it. So I've just said a lot and taken up a fair amount of time. So please forgive me. Why don't you give me your thoughts on what I just said, and also on the Russian sub situation?
Well, you did fine. Let's quickly let our audience know what's going on. What John is referring to is the president has ordered a number of nuclear subs to be positioned in the Baltic Sea, which sends a very clear message that we are prepared to defend or do whatever is necessary to a full scale should it be called upon to do so. Now, that doesn't mean I've got good friends in the administration that are in Russia with the Putin administration. And so, we've got good contacts there. I've had them for years. Quite frankly, here's been going. You've had President who has taken that he moved into Ukraine because of the biolabs that were there. There were pedophile operations going on. Those are but a few of the things that NATO refused to acknowledge and refused to do anything about. So, in one sense, you have to understand that Putin had precedent or justification. If you won't fix the problem, I will. Now, we had justification. Once the problem is fixed, you don't need to stay there. We don't need to continue war. You need to get out. Putin was agreeable to doing so. And of course, when Trump was a candidate, what was Trump's position? I'll have this thing fixed before I can even get sworn into office. And that was his position. And he had a very receptive response from Putin and his administration. However, what the president failed to keep in mind is that part of the problem with the issue in Ukraine was not just whether we were going to put boots on the ground, etc., but it was all the funding, all the money we were sending, and all the arms. Now, that's not up to the president. You remember, it is Congress that determines the budget, that puts the line items, etc., in there. And so the president just assumed that there was an awful lot of discourse going on in the country. That why are we spending all this money in Ukraine and we can't take care of our own borders? Why are we spending all this money in Ukraine and we can't feed our own people? We can't house our own people. We have our own homeless veterans, etc. And so there seemed to have been a sentiment that we're done. We've had enough in Ukraine. Besides that, we can't even get a full accounting as to where the money's going. In fact, the accountings that we are getting show that 60 to 70%, perhaps even higher, are going into people's pockets and not even reaching the battlefield. And so that is what the consensus seemed to be when the president was first elected. And he had met with Putin. Here's the terms. We're going to cut off the funding. We're going to go on ahead and have y'all do a ceasefire, to which Putin was agreeable. But then the minute the president said that, what happened on the Senate side? Suddenly another $40 billion is emergency pass-through money and sent with additional armaments and additional ordinances. It got to the point to where Putin was raising the question, Mr. President, who runs your country? Do you run your country, or does the U.S. Senate run your country? And so he began to become a little leery about, can you deliver, really bringing this thing to closure, or are you asking us to pull back only so that Ukraine can regroup and be resupplied and then carry it out for another 3 or 4 years, which we will not allow to happen. That's what's been going on back and forth. It's put the president in a very awkward position. He felt very comfortable based on what he knew the people wanted, that we could shut this thing down, quit spending money over there, and get out. Come to find out that politics doesn't work that way, John. Politics is governing, getting governance or giving consensus. And when you have members in the Senate, and we've talked about this, we don't have to go into detail, don't have time to go into detail on your show tonight, but why are so many members of Congress still wanting to shove money over to Ukraine? How much of it's coming back into NGOs our way that's going back into their pockets? And that's a discussion worth having. But since they're enriching themselves, they're not about to give it up. So it's been more difficult for the president to bring that to closure. So he's trying to put pressure on Russia that, look, even though we're still sending some armaments and things that way, you need to take the lead and you need to be the big boy and go ahead and get this thing resolved. Well, Putin's kind of like, if you can't deliver on your end, then I don't know that I have to listen to a whole lot of how you're going to tell me I need to deliver on ours. And that's where we're kind of at a stalemate right now. The president has upped the ante. I understand the concern. He hasn't said we're positioning nuclear subs to fire upon Russia. He's just simply saying we're doing a precautionary measure to make sure that they're there and to send the message should we need them. Do I think that message is necessary to be sent? No, because I think we have a good enough rapport with Russia. We can work behind the scenes. But he's the president. And quite frankly, look at all the things he's been doing. And I have to remind myself of this. And let me remind all of our listeners. He is the president, and we're not going to agree with him on every item that comes across the executive office's desk. And you have to take a look at the whole. Some things we may do differently, the same objective, but we may do things differently. But we have to just realize that we're a lot better position now than we would have been had it gone the other way 6 months ago, and we'd had President Harris in office.
Well, I want to throw this in. So I reached out to a friend of mine and asked them a question. I asked them their thoughts on President Trump's statement. And he's like, we have two Ohio, I believe it's 2 Ohio class subs in the Pacific and 2 in the Atlantic at all times. And then we've got a number that are in transit on a regular basis. So it's not like, so the bottom line is, to synopsize what he was getting at is, he was just stating what Russia already knows. It's not like
that is correct.
It may be kind of like news to many citizens, but it's nothing new that Russia doesn't know already is the case.
Well, you need to look at this, John. I mean, whether those subs are in the Pacific, Atlantic, or the Baltic Sea, their strike range is the same. So it makes no difference where they're located. They can still accomplish their mission regardless of where they're sitting. So what you're saying is exactly correct. At the end of the day, it didn't change the dynamics at all.
And then the other thing that I would say is, Donald Trump's a businessman. I mean, he's used to getting business done. He's used to doing big deals. He's used to building big buildings or renovating big buildings. And the bottom line is, in my role as what I do, I help small projects happen that can happen in a matter of a few minutes. And I am part of big projects that take months sometimes to put together.
Correct.
And if you've got a project that's going to, and I see this ending of the war between Ukraine and Putin, I'm not seeing a lot on Putin's end saying, I'm willing to scale back on my end. And what I don't even know that in Ukraine we're doing anything to step back either.
That's the problem. What you just said, John.
So
Putin stepped up and backed off a little bit, and then he got popped.
So let me just be a little bit more nuanced. here's the thing that is difficult with Trump is he's getting reports from other people that he has to rely on, and he has to some extent he may be able to verify, but it's not like he can go, he can't fly an Air Force One every single day and go to some place around the world or in the country to verify and put visualize on it to say, hey, this is going on. He's having to rely on to other people. We know that many times he's lied to. Sometimes we know he's being misdirected, and sometimes we know that he's not being given all the information. I don't think that happens with Putin, because Putin will have you
his information is pretty accurate.
He's going to throw you in the gulags and you're going to wind up dead, right?
Correct.
And so my point is, I think Trump can get some good information, but sometimes that's delayed. And so I can appreciate where Trump's at of like, hey, I don't see any movement on your end, Putin. I'm not seeing any movement on your end that's really showing me anything that you're drawing back. Hey, I mean, bottom line is we know that was part of what he ran on is I'm going to bring an end to this. Well, folks, he didn't say that he was going to do nothing to bring an end to it other than make a phone call. Now he implied that at times, but the bottom line is so for that withdrawal, I think we need to look at him and go, hey, I think Trump's being lied to, misled, but I don't think that Putin's doing a great job of being real obvious of, hey, okay, and if you're going to pull back 10 kilometers or something, or 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers, you're going to draw a line back or something like that. You can go, hey, I'm doing this. And I don't think Trump's seeing that done. And so what I would say to Putin, do something that says, I'm doing this, I'm pulling back. And then Trump can go to the whole world, I just saw Putin do that. Now we're going to pull back ourselves.
And that is certainly something he's looking at. But keeping this in mind, then we've already demonstrated this, that, okay, the American people don't want to spend any more money. We're out of here. Then he finds out that's what you say, but what you do, your Senate keeps sending money left and right over here. Now, whether we actually take action because we're retaliating against an attack you made on us, or whether we're taking action because you just got a big shipment of arms and we don't feel like having those arms used against us. You think we're being offensive, we're actually being proactive, trying to eliminate those arms before they're sent against us in Russia. So there's an awful lot of factors, an awful lot of play here. And I think the best thing we can do as a country, now the president may not have shared this agreement with me, is we need to do what we said we're going to do in the campaign. Our money needs to be spent on America. Once that happens, trust me, either NATO will step up and make sure that if they think they need to continue to fight, they can fund it for a while themselves, or they will come up with a quick solution. But as long as he sees us saying we don't want to spend any more money, but then that night an envelope or check comes, it's mixed signals, and Putin has a country to lead to, he has people to answer to, and it becomes a convoluted situation.
Well stated. Okay, let's go to some other points. I'm going to read all the other points that I wanted to cover. And then I want to know if there's something that you think is even bigger. I want to cover that first. CNN says Trump is the most consequential president of the century, or at least one of their people on CNN. And they would not have had this quote, they show the guy like he's an expert, but he says, CNN says Trump is the most consequential president of this century and probably of the last. I'm sure there's a few Obamaites that are like, clutching their pearls over that one. Schumer and Trump arguing Schumer wants about $1 billion per nominee put back in the general slush fund in order to get his nominees in. Want to talk about the Cincinnati mob attack. I want to talk a little bit more information. Apparently somebody said the N-word. I don't buy it. Not that I have not heard any proof that that word
No,
was said by someone with a Caucasian accent.
that's correct.
Republicans will keep the session open, are keeping the session open, and are not truly, while they may be leaving for recess, they're not actually recessing. Republicans are keeping the session open and have a vote every 4 days or so, that so Trump can't get in his people and can't have I believe is it recession appointments. ICE arrests 100 Venezuelan gang members, and I believe that was in Colorado.
Correct.
Illegal entry down 90% from when Trump took office. Net migration for the United States may be below zero for the first time in 50 years. And something that I am concerned about is Trump has done over 180 executive orders. Now, let me clarify that. A number of his executive orders were to undo the Democrat orders.
Correct.
It's about time Congress takes back their, takes back and stands up with a backbone and says, all these executive orders should be, instead of executive orders, it should be done by the Congress. But they don't want to do that, so they can always be, oh yeah, I support the president, or if when it's the Democrats doing some rascally thing, well, that's the Democrats. Well, take back your power, take back the control. All right. So where do you want to start, my friend? Or
Let's work our way.
Is there something that I haven't mentioned that's more important?
There is something that you haven't mentioned is more important. We'll get to that. We'll try to go quickly through what you just saw, but we'll work our way backwards. When you're talking about the executive orders, you need to understand this. There's a reason behind there's so many executive orders. And the difference this time between these executive orders and what's been done in the past is the president is trying to get them to be challenged in court to break the pattern of the judiciary establishing legislation. That accomplished today. We just got the Supreme Court just ruled hours ago 2 major rulings for the Trump administration. One was the ability
because I haven't even heard it.
The first one was where we had activist judges who would declare, let's take the Venezuelans. Nope, you can't send Venezuelans back because I don't think that's discriminatory. So nobody from Venezuela gets sent back now. All that gets put on hold. That's just one illustration. Another illustration that they did is the Trump administration said, we're going to cut out funding, federal funding to sanctuary cities because you're violating federal law. Another activist judge, nope, we're not going to let you do that because we think that's discriminatory. And their one judge shut down the entire operation until it could be appealed. The Supreme Court has now decisively said the issue has now been settled as of this afternoon. That is no longer allowed. District judges can no longer make rulings that affect national or nationwide injunctions. So it's over. The fight is over. And his whole basis, people will argue, why so many executive orders? Understand why he was doing it. He wasn't doing the executive orders to get his way. He was doing the executive orders, and he argued this before the Supreme Court every time. It's not a matter of can I send Venezuelans back or not. The question is, what does the Constitution say? Is it the executive branch that runs the government, or is it the judiciary? Now, which is it? Now, if it's the judiciary making a decision, what basis of the law have I violated? If it's because you just think it may be discriminatory, you have no judicial action there to take that and to shut down an entire national program. You have now switched from being a judiciary to executive. You're making policy for this country. And that is what he argued every time. That's why we had so many executive orders. The court has just agreed with that now, the Supreme Court. They gave him that victory, huge victory. What does it mean? It means now that all these sanctuary cities who are flaunting their positions in the face of the president, in the face of the American people, we're not going to let you ship any of our illegal immigrants out of here. They have a sanctuary. The president says, okay, if that is your position, here's our position. Now you can't do anything about it. You will no longer receive federal funding for any programs because you're violating federal law. That was put on suspension in the past. It has now just been declared legal this afternoon. The executive branch has the right to do that. So you're in for a rude awakening, folks, in sanctuary cities and sanctuary states starting this week, because the money that we promised to cut and couldn't because of activist judges just got reinstated. The cuts are there, and they're going to start feeling them as of tomorrow. And it will be a whole different game being played out.
And one of the reasons why I like that. So I had a conversation with Joel Skousen, who's a political commentator, nephew of Cleon Skousen, and in his 80s. And I said, well, should we just let these states, these sanctuary cities, should we just let them deal with the consequences of their own decisions? Or, and he's like, well, there's part of me that says yes, but the other part is, if they can get in the sanctuary city, eventually they get out of the sanctuary city into our cities and cause us problems and drive the wrong way on a freeway and kill a couple.
That's correct. And so we're going to be dealing that now. That will become an issue of the past. And when it comes to illegal immigration, we're going to start cranking it up now, because now they will not have a place to run to and to hide and try to be able to escape the arm of the law on a federal level. The second ruling of the Supreme Court, huge ruling the Supreme Court just made today, was it granted parents, basically I'm condensing it, I'm kind of abbreviating what they said, but in a nutshell, they said, parents, you're in control of the education of your children. And this is what this ruling meant. If a parent says, I don't want my kids to be taught transgenderism, you can opt them out. Remember, before, the school district were saying, John, you don't tell us what to teach your kids. You just bring them here and pick them up when they're done. We'll decide what they're going to do. We'll decide whether they play sports together, whether they compete against each other. We'll decide what kind of sex education they have, what books they read or don't read. You have no input. So just don't even come to school board meetings. They're ours. The Supreme Court gave them a death blow today. Absolutely not. Parents have the full right. If they decide that I don't want you to be taught this particular course, they can exempt you. And that is a huge ruling for American parents all across the country. Biggest thing that happened in the last 100 years. And so these are two major victories that have just occurred on the Trump administration. Now we're going to start seeing some action on a bunch of other things. We are building the base to change America, and it's coming together. Now you're going to have to remind me of all the other things.
I'm going to throw one more in here. Office of Special Counsel launches investigation into Jack Smith.
Correct.
You know, I want all this crap revealed by Obama, by Jack Smith, them going after Donald Trump. But my concern is this is going to become a tit for tat. How do we get guns down so we don't have the Democrats, when the Republicans are in session, going after Republicans and Obama using the not the DOJ but the IRS to go after nonprofits,
right.
Conservative nonprofits.
Well, quite frankly, there's only one way that's going to happen. And we have to hold people accountable for their actions, whether they're Republican or whether they're Democrat. And since you brought it up, I'm going to go ahead and pick up that issue now. Let's talk about real quickly where we're at with Russiagate. Of course, we've talked about it before. Russiagate being, there were a couple quick things that happened. I'll try to be brief. When it first occurred, they created the Russia election investigation. Did Russia influence the outcome of the election? Did they happen to make it so that Donald Trump got elected? We knew nothing was there, but that was their basis of their argument to hide the other thing they were doing. And what they were saying was that no, the bottom line of that investigation was Russia didn't just get involved, China, Iran, everybody tried to meddle in the U.S. election. China, and nobody had the ability. Yeah, nobody had the ability to change the election.
Israel.
So that was bogus.
I mean,
so then
what country didn't get involved? Great Britain.
They were all involved.
Israel.
They were all involved.
Brazil. Argentina.
And so they spent a bunch of money to create this cover to make you think that that was the big thing they were looking at when they already knew what the answer was. They did that to hide the second part of the program. The second was called Russiagate. And what they attempted to do is How do we keep Donald Trump, this was in the first election, 2016, from becoming the president? Well, first of all, since he got the nomination, what we need to do is discredit him so that if he were to win in November, he could not assume office. And here's what they did with it. They sat in the Oval Office. Biden and Obama sat together. They signed off on it. This is not speculation. We have the actual
Hillary
documents.
was there too. Wasn't Hillary
They,
Clinton as Secretary of State there as well?
Hillary Clinton, James Comey, the director of the FBI, was there. John Brennan, the director of CIA. Susan Rice was the director of national security. James Clapper, DNI. And the list goes on and on and on. I mean, it's too long to even mention on your show. So all these people were involved. They ordered the investigation 4 days after the election to get started. Now, here's what they came up with. And this is what is so distressing and shocking. This is why it's so important to the American people. Is they said, look, use all of our agencies, intelligence, work with foreign intelligence agencies, work with MI6, work with Mossad, anybody you need to, work with Russia, and create documents, official documents, that show that he was a spy. He's guilty of espionage and cannot hold the office of the presidency. Well, that didn't go too well. They couldn't seem to get their facts together. They kept contradicting each other, and it didn't actually work the way they wanted to. So here's what they did in December. You remember he was elected in November. In December, the president met, this was Obama, and everybody we just talked about, and said, look, Trump is such a threat to democracy that I am going to authorize Operation Silence. What was Operation Silence? Operation Silence, this is all written out. This is not speculation or I think this is what it was. There's documentation and proof that this was. Operation Silence was the assassination of Donald J. Trump before he could be sworn in 2017. They moved forward. They created the Black Hawk teams to put it in place. They had everything, the logistics worked out. They were a week and a half away from executing Operation Silence when it was discovered by a whistleblower. They got nervous that it would get out to the American public and had to abandon and cancel the operation at the last second. Now, John, that is treason, that is insurgency, and that is
attempted murder.
That's just naming a few. This is why this is so important. Now, where does it go from here? DNI, Tulsi, head of DNI, discovered some of these documents. We found further corroboration now in burn bags over at the Bureau, the FBI, that Cash found. We found others over at the CIA with John Ratcliffe. They have discovered they have such a paper trail. This is not a matter, is it gray? It's black and white. They sent all that information to the Attorney General. Pam's put together a special strike force to review it to make sure that something wasn't manufactured, that this was real. They determined that it was authentic 100%. This is precedent now. Pam has just convened a grand jury, federal grand jury. They have reviewed this information. They were coming back as they expected indictments all the way to the top, from Obama all the way down. You can't ignore this. Here's what I want to tell our listeners. I want you to think about this for a minute. The Constitution only addresses one crime in its entire document. And what is it? That's treason. And what does it say? It doesn't talk about, hey, when y'all put your little country together, make sure that you have a penalty for somebody stealing an apple or, somebody, stealing a piece of property. They only address one crime, treason. And they went so far as to say, this crime is so bad that we're not so sure it needs to go through the jurisprudence process. You remember the Constitution already had the Supreme Court written in it. There was already a justice system, the third branch. But it said in cases such as this, there may be the necessity to create a military tribunal, military council, for the specific reason of dealing with this because it affects national security. Why would they consider that? Here's what you need to think about, John, the impact. If you kill somebody, you affected your family, that family, and maybe some of the community members, and that's it. When you're talking about treason, who have you affected? You have affected every member of the United States, every citizen. At this stage, that's 330 million people you've affected. That is why they recommended that we take a look or have the option for a military tribunal. That is still in play. That is being reviewed now. So we have two different venues that we're going down. We're going down a federal grand jury. And by the way, that grand jury, remember, it's sealed. None of this is public yet, but it appears that that grand jury has been convened in Florida. You'll get people who have common sense on a grand jury in Florida. That's why they're so confident you'll come back with indictments. Now, to answer your question before you get too excited, so people are going to jail tomorrow. John, when you go down the judicial system, not military tribunal, but the judicial system, you know how long it takes to go through getting a trial, to getting appeals, to pulling, was this fall of the presidential immunity? I mean, there are so many different little nooks and crannies
At
it
least
could
this
go
is
through.
starting in the first 6 months. So most likely,
It is.
not only is this, it'll hit trial before the end of his presidency, hopefully, so we can at least not have the Democrats shut it down.
Well, see, and here's the second thing that it does, John, is you and I both know when we start saying, John, I got some evidence on you, what's your initial reaction? Well, I didn't do it by myself. If you'll give me a little bit of a deal, I got 10 other people I can show you. They did worse things than I did. And it just unravels so quickly. So this is probably the biggest scandal ever to hit America, not just in this century, not just in this decade. This is the biggest issue. I have people tell me, surely our government wouldn't take out a duly elected or a president elect. We've done it before. We did it with JFK, and why would we not do it a second time? So, quite frankly, folks, this is probably the biggest issue that you will be seeing coming up in the months ahead. And somebody tells me justice at last. I would tell you, pursuit of justice at last. This thing can go down a million different paths, Sean. Which ones we don't know. I do know this: if we decide to pull it from the Attorney General and give it to the military tribunal, I know what way that'll go, and that'll go very quickly. But the question becomes: is America ready for that? And this is new territory for all of us. We're in this together. But the one thing we need to keep in mind: we all want liberty and justice, the same liberty and justice for all.
Well, I would say, at the very least, this needs to come out. If Obama was in on this, it definitely needs to come out, and it needs to be known, and his name needs to be tarnished. And if I was Trump, I'd do everything I could by the 2016 elections to get this out. So, or not 2016, the 2026 elections. He's got to get this information out.
That's being done as we speak. And here's the difference, and this is what's making them very nervous, John. Before in 2016, the president believed that this is how politics worked. You and I don't agree, but I won. You and I are going to be friends now, and we're going to work for the betterment of the country. What he found out is you and I don't agree. You can't stand me. You're going to cut my back regardless of anything I do. Makes no difference what I do. So now guess what? He's realizing that we have to take a different approach. The only way we can correct this is to eradicate it. So I don't see a lot of mercy being showed from this point forward. And I think it's going to be pursued aggressively as it should be. And quite frankly, with the documentation there, this is not speculative. Then you'll notice that the president, Obama, Hillary, I know this for a fact, Clapper, Renault, they're beating each other up, trying to figure out who can get to the best lawyer the quickest, because they are lawyering up. And you'll notice they've been very quiet, other than to say, "Oh no, we already looked at that. There was still election interference." They're trying to use that first investigation to cover for the second one. But we're not talking about the first election investigation. We're talking about the second one, Russiagate. They quickly become mum and don't say a word.
Okay, so then the other subjects that I wanted to hit, net immigration for the United States may be below zero for the first time in 50 years. Illegal entry down 90% from when Trump took office. ICE arrests 100 Venezuelan gang members in Colorado. And Republicans, this is dirty to me. Republicans will keep the session open and not allow Trump to get his recess appointments in. And then the Cincinnati mob attack. The more information that comes out, I mean, the bottom line is this: if this had been black people getting beat up by a white mob, this would have been the biggest news story for the last, week and a half. It would be all the time. It's all we would hear about. It's the other way around. And then the N word is supposedly was said, but nobody can prove it. In fact, I want to say I heard on one of the YouTube clips, I heard someone use the N word, but it definitely wasn't a Caucasian that said it.
That is correct. That is correct. So you got two separate issues you brought there. Let's take the latter one first, and then we're going to get back to the gang issue. On the latter one, what's going on the Hill? What's going on with the recess appointments, etc. Here is so that people understand. We just gave you some exciting news. We're trying to really move in now to get indictments and start to really drain and clean the swamp. That's exciting. I gave you the exciting news about the Supreme Court, but let's get back to reality. The reality is there's still corruption that is deeper than you and I can calculate, still on the Hill and across this country. And you're seeing that evident now, because here's what happens. They don't want to give the president his people, and they realize that they will have to, but they need concessions. Why do they need concessions? This is Republican and Democrat, okay? Because you got a president that's saying, look, we're not going to be spending money on fraud and waste and abuse anymore. And you're sending me all these bills. Even the big, beautiful bill had a bunch of it in there. And so I'm going to be doing what we call a special appropriations to provisos to cut that and to eliminate that. And they don't want that. So the Republican rhinos, which is who you have in the Senate Majority Leader, let's just call it like it is, with John Thune, he's saying, well, I'm a Republican, so I can't be seen as opposing this. Let me get the Democrats. Let's Chuck and I go out to dinner. And you tell them we're not going to give them anything unless we get money back for these particular programs. You pick five, I'll pick five. And that's what they're doing. And they're asking for not $50 for lunch money. They're asking for billions of dollars to be placed back into the budget to create deficits again. One of the things that shocks me that Schumer wants in one of his programs, he wants billions for Hamas. I mean, he wants billions put back in under the guise that we are going to feed these poor little starving kids in Gaza, who, let's just clear the air, there's more food than needs there than probably would feed half of Europe. That's not the issue.
Well, what
the issue is Hamas.
When we see these pictures, is the women
Right.
that are holding them, or the people that are holding them, are overweight. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Some of them may not be as fat as me, but those starving kids are being held by their mothers who happen to be very well fed.
So see, it's all now you begin to see how this works. He's asking money for a feed the poor children program. It's actually for Hamas. But I'm not just going to pick on Chucky. I'm going to pick on all of them, especially the rhinos. They're asking for money for, we cut it all out of USAID, remember? Oh, no. I got to have some money back, because that money's got to be given to these NGOs, because the NGOs don't get money. Then remember, there's no need for me to serve on their board. I'm not going to get my board check this month. So I got to have some of that money restored.
Let judges in, and I don't want to let special appointments in, because maybe Epstein information will be brought out about.
Well, and here's the part. Even aside from Epstein, I don't want a judge that goes by the Constitution. I want a judge that when I pick up someone and say, John, you remember it was my vote that got you there. By the way, I need you to take a strong look at this case, and here's what I really think you should be considering, so how it should be done. That's what they're looking for. Corruption is rampant, and that is why you're seeing these fights that you see. That's the discouraging part. That is a part of reality. Now let's take another little frustrating part, but we have a solution for the second frustrating thing that you mentioned. What are we doing with these gangs? That's what they are. They're thugs. They're gangs that have the audacity to go up to people unsuspectingly, cold cock them, circle around them, beat them, have all their little friends see who can get the pictures the fastest on iPhone and load them up to Rumble or to YouTube and get their 15 seconds of fame. What kind of message are we sending, John? Here's what we're doing. First of all, let's talk about, we've got the riots that are going on in New York with Hamas. You remember the Palestinian riots? We've got the active shooters that are happening in Montana, that are happening. Or we could sit here and name, I'll lose track of how many people get shot every day across this country now. The message that we're sending, if you look at where this is occurring, John, it's occurring mostly in blue sanctuary states. So we're sending two messages that we're going to need to address immediately in this country. The first message is, don't worry about creating crimes, because if you do it in the right place, or you can get to the right place, a blue city, a sanctuary city, they'll make sure you get to stay out on the street, and nothing will happen to you. We won't let them ship you away. The second thing that's happening, so that message is being sent, and it's encouraging more crime. That's why you see the numbers going up in blue cities. The number of violent crime is actually decreasing in red cities and red states. Now, the second thing you're seeing is what we just talked about on the thugs and the beatings that are occurring with innocent people across the country. You're seeing this happen. Then you're seeing this again in blue cities. You're seeing racist council members, elected officials coming out and say, well, they had it coming. They deserve to be beat down. And by telling that, what are they sending the message to their chief? Because you remember the chief works for them. So they've got to be careful how they function underneath them. Their chief is, well, yeah, we're going to look into it. We're going to do everything we can. And what does that mean? Nothing's going to occur. They'll get 3 or 4 people. They'll put them out on bond if they even get that. And then, of course, eventually it'll all go away. Now, what message are you sending to young people? Oh boy, open season on crime. Nothing happens to us. And then what is the third thing that's
long as
happening?
it's against white people, long as it's against
Exactly.
white people, nothing's going to happen to you. The problem is eventually what winds up happening is a bunch of white people wind up getting angry and start taking action back, and then there really does become a race war.
You see, they're trying to create a great divide.
That's
And it's
exactly
not just so much against black versus white, it's against crime, good versus evil. They want evil to prevail. They want sanctuary cities. They want crime to skyrocket, because in so doing, they can feel like they can regain control. And what is the third thing that we need that happens in these situations? You've got YouTube, you've got Rumble, you've got the rest of them that are encouraging these young people to air this kind of stuff. Let me tell you where the problem lies, John. It's called, if you're associated with, are you a help with a crime? The word just escaped my mind. It'll come back to me in a minute. But if you're involved with a crime, if you're associated with or helping with, that is a crime in and of itself. So whether you are the actual one beating the person that you caught off guard, or whether you're the one standing around filming it, encouraging, hit him again, you should be being held accountable for your actions just as well. The
Yes.
person that is beating him maybe should get 10 years for assault, but the person that's associated with the crime should maybe be getting 6 months at least. And this is the thing that we have got to do. We've got to start addressing this crime issue with ferocity and really going after it across the country. We've already started after today's ruling. We're going to fix this sanctuary city, so you're going to get nailed wherever you're at. There's no place to hide anymore. And we need to aggressively go after illegal immigrants, criminals, anybody that breaks the law, hold them to a standard, set that example with what we call Russiagate, that nobody even at the top escapes punishment because of their or escapes the consequence of their actions. And then going after our young people by saying, you want to do this kind of stuff, you're going to jail and you're going to serve time. And by the way, companies that are helping promote it, we're going to hold you accountable as well. You're going to lose your license. You're going to be fined. You may even spend some jail time behind bars for helping to promote this kind of activity.
Right.
That's what we're going to have to do to bring this country back, John. And it can't happen a minute too soon.
Well, amen, brother. Because we need we need to come together as people in our nation, and we need to say, hey, we're not for lawlessness. And this is why I harped on the preachers last show. One of the main reasons why the the civil rights package was passed is because white ministers were talking to their congregations, hey, we got to do this.
Correct.
And the bottom line is we need preachers to stand up, white, black, Asian, Polynesian, whatever they happen to be. And they need to say, the bottom line is this has got to stop. It's not it's not acceptable. Anyone that's doing it is a heathen. And because if it doesn't stop, it's just going to spread. It's going to spread. And the bottom line is it's going to happen within your own race, because if you lose respect for another, it's going to happen in your own. And I just don't want to see where this goes. It goes to really, really bad places. So preachers, ministers, you need to come out and you need to say, absolutely, we can't let this happen. We can't stand for this.
I believe, John, we are laying the infrastructure for a great awakening in this country and for restoring freedom, liberty, safety, and security. But unless we move forward on every aspect of it, it will be for naught. The final thing I want to throw in as we close, I know you're getting short on time.
Well,
but folks, it will do us.
I do want to hit the 100
okay.
ICE arrest. 100.
Well, let me quickly say this, folks. It will do us no good to lay the foundation and to clean the porch, shall we say, if we don't train our young people in values and principles and faith. We'll be back in the same boat 10 years from now.
Well,
now, back on the question you just raised, yes, because of the fact that especially with this ruling that just came out, we are going after, you're going to see us target every illegal immigrant, especially those who have committed crimes, such as the MS-13. You're going to see us doing that. We just picked up 4 Venezuelans in Texas. And here's the shocking part. They've killed countless numbers of people in the United States since they've been here. And they were harboring themselves in Lower Texas. We picked them up now, and they thought that they were going to get out. They thought that it was going to be the same situation. They would go before a judge. They were going to have a liberal prosecutor that would, yes, you did bad. We're going to have a trial. But in the meantime, you can go out and have some more fun. We'll call you when the time comes, when your court date comes up. ICE was waiting to get them. That's where they're going to be released. We picked them up. They're gone. We're shipping them out. You're going to start seeing that on a mass area now. We've shipped out thousands of people. We've done an awful lot, John, here lately. But you're going to see it increase 100-fold now that we have the infrastructure in place. And hang on, because you thought people were upset about the number of people we were deporting before. You haven't seen anything yet, John.
Well, good. I sure hope so. Net migration for the United States may be below 0 for the first time in 50 years. Wow.
It is 0 at the southern border, and it's actually below 0 at the southern border. But why are you not just saying it's 0%? Because I understand, remember, we have not been able to plug all the holes in the northern border yet. It's a much bigger border. You remember a lot of them shifted from the south to the north, and we're having to secure the northern border. But the same as we did with the southern border, we will hopefully get accomplished here shortly on the northern border, and we'll have America's borders, plural, safety once again.
Well, it's 6 o'clock my time, 8 o'clock your time, brother. I asked you to be on till 8. And once again, Michael Letts of Invest USA. Invest USA, folks, they have handed out 17,000 bulletproof and active shooter vests to law enforcement, first responders. God bless you and the work that you're doing, my friend. Thank you so much.
Well, God bless you, John, for what you're doing to keep the truth out. Folks, let me end by saying this. It's been a long haul. We may not always agree. You may not get everything you're looking for, but we are definitely in the right direction. And I believe that God is providing the guidance and wisdom for the days ahead. Let's keep that in mind. We cannot accomplish this mission without God's blessing. That's why it was so important what John said. Churches, line up. It's time for you to take the lead, and let's restore America based on our values and principles and faith to the greatness that God intended for us to have. Thank you, John. God bless you. God bless America.
God bless you, brother. Bottom line is, ask for repentance. There's grace.
Amen. Amen.
So, all right. Thank you, my friend. Folks, go to Invest USA. That's investusa.org. And folks, this has been Talk with John. We will see you in 2 weeks, or not 2 weeks. We'll see you next week, folks. Thank you for being here, Michael X. We'll see you next